today the ghost of the copper hole. So welcome back to Third Rate Content. Today we're in Church Stetton. We're going to have a bit of an investigate of this ancient town of South Shropshire. We're going to find out some of the history, and we're also going to investigate the ghost of the copper hole and find out all about that very spooky story. So buckle up and I'll see you out here. So St. Lawrence's Church, Church Stetton, has Anglo-Saxon origins. And the stonework here on the tower is exquisite, and they're not gargoyles, these are called grotesques because no water comes out of their mouth, and these are particularly grotesque and creepy. This particular grave marker has pretty intricate lattice work. I've got no idea how old it is. It looks old though. Yeah, just behind me up on the wall there is a Shela Na Gig. Very ancient stone symbol. It's not quite known whether it's pagan or Christian, but there's not many of them in Shropshire, and there is a website, the Shela Na Gig project, which documents them all and gives some of the history, so check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description box. But it is supposed to be a female figure with its private parts on display. Yeah, there's this absolutely lovely, what I think is a Norman arch just beneath the Shela Na Gig. And to quote the Shela Na Gig project, these stone figures are quasi-erotic carvings of a female figure, usually found on Norman, or to be more precise, Romanesque churches. They consist of an old woman squatting and pulling apart her vulva, a fairly strange thing to find on a church. The carvings are old and often do not seem to be part of the church, but have been taken from a previous, older, usually Romanesque building. See the weathering on the Church Stetton Shela as compared to the surrounding masonry. It is very likely that the Shela comes from an earlier 12th century chapel that stood on the site. On a positive note though, she's definitely got a smile on her face. Just showing how ancient this graveyard is. An actual sandstone coffin. I've seen a few of these now around the places, but that looks like it was from a pretty tall person for the era that it would have been from. 6 foot or more. Look at that timber work. Exquisite. These are very much like the mercy seats at St. Lawrence's Church in Ludlow. So you do wonder, with this being St. Lawrence's in nearby Church Stetton, whether the same artisans were employed to fashion these. The detail is next level. These nooks, you do wonder if these go back to the Saxon times. Yeah, these are quite unusual. They almost look like, to me, like wheelie bins or wheelie bin hole, you know, places to put, but they're actually white sandstone, I think, memorials. Not a great deal left on them now. It's sort of flaked off, the sandstone has in places. They're quite an unusual shape, those. The grave markers here are leaning against this wall. I don't know why they are. Perhaps something to do with the path when it was laid, but it seems slightly disrespectful just to move them like that. But then, who am I? Got a new tree in the churchyard here in St. Lawrence's. It looks an old one. I'm not sure how old, but it's pretty wide and it has sort of split into two. Old king coal. Here on the high street of Church Stetton once stood the town's markets hall, but it was demolished in 1963 and left this open space, which is where weekly markets on Thursdays are held in Church Stetton up till this day. There was a preceding market hall that was built in 1617 that preceded the red brick market hall that was pulled down in the 60s. And the high street used to be twice as wide, and it was known as Bristol Street because this was the road that ultimately led to Bristol. But in the years that passed, the street was narrowed and it became known as High Street, not so much as Bristol Road or Bristol Street. And we're just walking along High Street and looking down Sandford Avenue, which is like the main drag of Church Stetton town centre. Yeah, this post box looks great with the knitted tractor with a Santa mouse in it, I must say. So today's ghost story is provided by the blog News from the Past. Newspaper articles from the past that you didn't know about. So, on a cold, dark September night in 1881, William Roberts is walking back from a boozy dinner in Church Stetton. As he staggers up a bank towards an old mine shaft, a chill creeps over his skin and he glances around and he sees that he is being followed by a glowing white spectre. William's breathing speeds up along with his pace. William's heart beats faster and faster. The events that would follow would send Church Stetton into a panic and would cause headlines all around the nation and all around the world. Let's find out about the ghost story. We're just making our way down to the Church Stetton train station for Act 1 of today's ghost story. Just having a quick look at Stratton Antiques Market. You could do a whole video in there, a short one. But talking of ghosts, look at that ghost sign on the wall there. And spooky coincidence. And this is the road down to where Church Stetton train station is currently sited. It has moved a little bit over the years. Yeah, it's moved to the other side of that road bridge, you can see. It's night time and a weary female traveller arrives at Church Stetton train station. She has two old-looking cases with her, one with a broken lock. The lady inquires about train times and then she walks off. The lady was a familiar face to locals. It's a face that had been away from Church Stetton for some years. Of course, there've been two train stations at Church Stetton, as we just quite close to each other, but the railway line had to move a bit, and the railway station that the mystery lady left her cases at was the first one. We've just been at the second, but like I say, they're very close to each other. But the last time the mystery lady was seen, she was walking up Hasler Road out of Church Stetton. But now the story moves on 7 years. And cider mill owner William Roberts has been at a meeting of his tenants in Church Stetton. It is thought that Roberts may have had the meeting with his tenants in the Britannia Inn in Church Stetton. And bleary-eyed, Roberts is now making his way up Hasler Road to his home, which is in Soudley, 2 miles walk away. This is the A49 road, which runs all the way down past Hereford. Yeah, from Warrington, way past Hereford, the A49 runs. But the original Roman road ran very close to it and was just moved across not even a quarter of a mile, you know, like a fifth of a mile, if that. As Roberts makes his way home up Hasler Road, he feels that he is being followed. And just before we go on, I do find it fascinating and accurate how people know when they're being watched. It's a sixth sense, and again it shows you that we've got these senses that are not accounted for in materialistic science, but we all know we've got them. I know people who just know when they're being looked at, and even I know when I'm being looked at from a high window or something. You just can feel it burning into you. So there you go, there's almost proof that we have senses that are not accounted for. Back in the 1800s, none of these houses would have been on Hasler Road, or a lot of them wouldn't have been. It would have just been a country lane disappearing into the gloom as Hasler was followed by a spectre in white. Or should I say, Roberts was followed by a spectre in white up Hasler Road. Roberts pauses several times to let the lady in white pass, but she slows down behind him every time he does this. This unnerves Roberts even further. He quickens his pace to get home as quick as he can. Stopping to catch his breath, Roberts looks back behind him, and he was startled to see the lady was gliding towards him. She comes to a halt just yards away, removes the cotton bonnet from her head and holds it up to him. Stunned, all he could do was watch. The ghostly figure moved away from Roberts, straight through a hedge and disappeared down a hole in the ground, scaring Roberts and making him run home and hide himself in his bed until the next day. Yeah, I'd say a lot of these houses are Edwardian. They would have been built 50 years after the ghost of the mine shaft. When William Roberts had slept for the night and spent all night thinking of the apparition that he had seen, the face came back to him and seemed somewhat familiar to him. It was the face of the woman Roberts had last seen 7 years previously at Church Stetton train station. A woman who had mysteriously vanished. The woman was known locally as Sarah Ducket, and the more Roberts thought about Sarah Ducket, the more he felt that he knew what had happened to her. Yeah, Bill Roberts believed that Sarah Ducket had been murdered and thrown down the disused and now filled in mine shaft on Hasler Road. Once Roberts was decided that he knew who the ghost was, he grabbed his coat and rushed out of the door to spread the news of this revelation, and there were plenty willing to hear it. Word spread fast round Church Stetton, and the streets were filled with excitable chatter, as you can imagine. And as people heard the story, others came forward with their own sightings of strange spectres they'd spotted near Hasler Hole. After several meetings, Roberts launched a campaign to dig out the old mine shaft, Hasler Hole, and see if the remains of Sarah Ducket could be found at the bottom. Digging commenced. The story hit the papers across the whole country and the world as word spread about this Shropshire community that had been whipped into a frantic state of excitement. Visitors arrived from the length and breadth of the country to see just what had whipped the Church Stetton community up so much, and Roberts was on hand to tell all of his story. Roberts greeted the guests like a showman with a table and told them everything he knew about the ghost of Sarah Ducket. Yeah, Roberts would march any visitors to Church Stetton up the bank to the muddy hole that was being dug, looking for the body. The newspapers of the day would describe how the gentlemen would peer into the hole, shake their heads and say, "Oh dear." Young ladies would approach with evident dread and, craning their necks, would utter how dreadful it was what had happened to Sarah Ducket at the bottom of the hole. Though after some days and weeks, the interest turned to derision and the digging stopped. But just as the mystery threatened to remain unsolved forever, a new revelation showed itself in the form of a letter which dropped through the door of a local trader on Church Street, signed by one who knows. It claimed to reveal the true location of the body of Sarah Ducket. A trader on Church Street was handed the note, and as he unfolded the note, "You will fail to find the body of Sarah Ducket in the copper hole. Look in the cellar of the toll bar. Examine the part nearest the road in the left-hand corner. Signed, the one who knows." News of a ghost of Sarah Ducket was still being published all around the country, and reports of other ghostly sightings were still coming in. An old man from the town of Church Stetton was said to be walking home when she appeared to him and blocked his route, causing him to faint. Youth on horseback, was said to be so scared by an apparition in white that he dug the spurs in and didn't look round until he reached his home some miles away in Lee Botwood. And another lady was so scared in Church Stetton by the ghost looking at her through the parlour window that she fainted just like the old man. So many rumours flying around, some of them perhaps a little bit iffy. A proper investigation had to be carried out into someone who knew of Sarah Ducket in life, because a letter had been sent from Worcestershire by someone claiming to be Sarah Ducket herself. So things were getting out of hand, and the publicity the story was causing, just like today, was probably causing people who were not sound of mind to send letters to people who were investigating the ghost story. And that person who knew Sarah Ducket in life was the Reverend Holland Sanford, who was the rector of Eton under Hayward and knew Sarah as a young girl. Sarah Ducket was born in Sidley, a few miles from Church Stetton, in 1830. Her parents were Anne and George Ducket. George was a stonemason who tragically died when Sarah was only 10 years old. Understandably, her mother and Sarah fell on hard times, and Sarah's mother had to sell the family home to keep the family going in these very, very stressful times that they must have been. After the sale of the house, Sarah was said by Reverend Sanford to have spent some of the money on travelling the world. She gave the Reverend Sanford £25 to look after before she headed to Liverpool and her ship to leave the country. It was believed that Sarah had sailed to Australia. This was after the passing of her mother. Just over a year after leaving for Australia, Sarah came back to Church Stetton with her 2 broken cases, and that's where she was spotted by locals at Church Stetton train station. 2 or 3 days later, she was seen at Longville in the Dale, several miles from Church Stetton. And not long later, it is thought that Sarah was received into the workhouse as she had become destitute. And the final part of Sarah's tale came when the Reverend Sanford received a letter from Maltley Workhouse in Worcestershire. It's said that in 1876, just 2 years after being taken into the workhouse, she was moved to the infirmary suffering from acute rheumatism, but made a speedy recovery. Sarah was in high spirits as she left the ward of the workhouse. She walked down the stairs with her bundle of clothes in hand, and she was just wishing the nurse goodbye when suddenly Sarah slumped to the ground. The nurses rushed to her side, but she was lifeless. 5 years later, the Reverend Sanford wraps up the investigation. His findings are published in the Wellington Journal on the 5th of November 1881, just 4 weeks after Mr. Roberts claimed he saw her apparition following him up Haslar Road before disappearing down the Copper Hole, sparking hysteria in Church Stetton on a nationwide interest. Unlike Mr. Roberts, who got to the bottom of the disused pit, the Reverend did not find out where Sarah Ducket had lain to rest, who was buried. She sadly died with no family or friends around her to claim her body. But it is thought that the workhouse, which was common practice in those days, sold Sarah's lifeless body to be used by the medical profession and used in a local anatomical school. A terrifying end for someone sad and lonely, like Sarah Ducket. A sad ghost story, but a ghost story nevertheless. They're all sad and they all have a story to them. But anyway, thank you for watching to the end of today's third-rate content. It's been a really fascinating winter walk around Church Stetton. A ghost story, really interesting one, I thought. Also sad at this time of year, Christmas, because we're filming this video just before Christmas 2023. It'll probably be going up after Christmas, maybe even the New Year. But thank you for joining me this year. It's been a brilliant 2023. Achieved basically everything I wanted the channel to achieve, except 1,000 subscribers. We're not far off yet. And anyway, I enjoy doing third-rate content, so there's absolutely no chance of me stopping in the medium, short or long-term future, excluding extreme physical hindrances. But anyway, if I don't see you soon, I'll see you 3 times as soon. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you've got anything to say. I love that. And I reply where applicable and acceptable. So anyway, see you soon. Have a great Christmas and a happy New Year. Third-rate content, signing out.